Welcome back to Sleep Well Horrors. We got a nice long story for you. Good long one for the end of the week. You guys seem to like the longer ones more than the short ones, which is really crazy to me. But we do have a good long one for you. This one's called I Delivered Pizza to an Address I'd Never Heard of Before. I Almost Didn't Escape Alive by J.L. Goodwin 1990. He's on Reddit. He will be linked. He has many stories, 40 plus, on his Reddit, and go ahead and check him out. Go to his profile and give the story a like. Before we start, also go ahead and check out our Spotify. The stories are going to be on there as well. And it really helps us if you go on there, follow that, like the stories, etc. And then all of our social medias that are linked in the description. Specifically our Discord and our Reddit. Go check that out. Trying to build a community up. And we would love it if everyone joined. It'd be fun. But we got a good story for you. A lot of dialogue for me and a good amount of narration for Andrea. Because as much as I love the read for you guys, I rather just do the dialogue. So, which is perfect because the story has lots of it. Anyway, without taking any more time at the 2-minute mark, let's go ahead and start. As always, Andrea's going to read first. The first sentence.
When you're at the end of your shift as a delivery driver, there is one sentence that is worse than any other to hear.
Hey, Hal. Hold up a minute. I've got a customer on the line.
My shoulders slumped as I felt a mix of exasperation and annoyance as I turned back towards the front counter. Please tell me you're joking. I just finished helping cleaning the pizza parlor after an 8-hour shift of manning the phones and register and running over what must have been half of the damn country's delivering orders. I'd locked the front door and been in the middle of heading into the back room to clock out. Mind already at home, where dinner waited for me, and my fiancé lay in bed, ready to roll over and wrap her arms around me once I climbed in beside her. But my boss had to put a delay on that. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at his hulking figure as he leaned against the imitation brick, listening intently to whoever was on the other end of the line. Aside from his quiet replies and the scribbling of a pen on his notepad, the only sounds that could be heard when the hum of the building's ventilation system, what sounded like blues or swing music crackling out of the ancient radio in the back, and the constant smack of the rain against the glass against the front windows. I waited, shifting impatiently on the balls of my feet. Finally, he hung up, turning to me, but I spoke before he even had a chance to open his mouth.
You cannot be freaking serious, Tony. I've already locked up for the night and finished cleaning. Everything is powered down, and more to the point, we're closed.
I pointed behind me to the clock ticking on the wall, which showed the time to be almost 10 at night. In response, Tony's face darkened, and he also pointed a meaty finger at the clock.
Actually, Hal, if you take another look, we're not officially closed for another 5 minutes. And you remember our motto?
He pointed to the large sign over the front counter.
Whether an hour to close or a minute, if you order, we make it happen.
His scowl intensified.
That's been our creed since my father opened this joint 17 years ago. And it's not about to change now.
I let out a groan.
Dude, you take tradition a little too far, you know that?
The man didn't respond, instead turning back and picking up the order he'd scribbled out before continuing.
How was my New York accent? Was it good?
Perfect.
Okay. Anyways, the gentleman ordered 3 pepperonis, and he said he'd give the delivery driver a nice tip to compensate for ordering so late.
Now he did turn back, giving me a sly look.
And I thought, where you could always use the extra dough, that getting a few extra bucks would be something you'd jump at.
I felt a sudden, intense heat and forced myself not to begin hurling the string of insults at his smug face that I so badly wanted to. When I'd moved to my hometown with my fiance, when I'd moved back to my hometown with my fiance to help take care of my sick mother 3 years ago, trying to find a job I could use to pay the bills had been like trying to find a needle, not just in a haystack, but a damn grain silo. The place had really gone to hell since I'd left in the late 2000s, in large part due to the fact that many of the people my age weren't sticking around to help tend the farms or stores like they had for generations. With the shift of the last 2 decades, they had instead left for the cities, leading to many farms to fall into foreclosure and businesses in town to either economize or flat out close up. And with their savings rapidly dwindling and Rita's remote job not set up yet, I'd had no choice but to snatch up the first opening I could find as the cashier and sole delivery driver for the only pizza place still open. You know the old phrase,
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
that's exactly how I describe the job. It paid the rent on the small apartment we'd grab above the old warehouse store, but only just. Every extra dollar I could make was vital to keeping our heads above water. Tony knew that, and he delighted in running me ragged every chance he could for what amounted to scraps on a stray dog's plate. And I seriously hate the son of a bitch for it. I glared at the man for another moment, then let out a resigned sigh. He had me by the short hairs, and he knew it.
Fine.
I grumbled, holding my hands up and walking back across the room to stand next to him. A smirk crossed his face, and he patted me on the shoulder, handing me the notepad as he walked past me.
Just deliver these, and you can head straight home afterwards. You can bring the money with you in the morning. Hey, I'll even be a nice guy and make these too myself.
Real kind of you, I thought bitterly, but held my tongue. Instead, I looked down at the paper, silently reading out the order before lowering my eyes to the address that he'd given me. I felt a slight pang of surprise shoot through me. The address was one I'd never heard of before, which, to someone born and raised in the area, was not something I was used to.
Where the hell is this address, Tony?
I called out, turning out and watching as he fired up the wood stove, dough and ingredients already laid out on the metal counter. He shrugged.
Honestly, I don't know, Hal. I've never been. I've never heard of it before either, but it's not the first time. Don't forget, those big shot developers who bought up all the farmland have been building those subdivisions out here for the last 5 to 10 years, trying to get people out here. Chances are someone actually was dumb enough to buy one, and that's where it is.
He turned back to begin making the pizzas before calling over his shoulder.
Anyways, he gave directions to get there. They're written on the back.
I stared at his back for another few moments, then shrugged as well. Makes sense, I guess.
That is the hardest accent I've ever had to do.
Well,
The hardest accent.
At least I don't think you're gonna have to make it for much longer.
That's like, I mean, it's fine. It's just that I gotta like drop letters and like drop R's and stuff like that from like it. So it's hard to it's really hard to read the dialogue and also keep up with the pace of how they talk. Woo!
It sounds good. Half an hour later, I stepped out the back door in the pouring rain. Bending over to protect the boxes, I made a mad dash for my car, which sat almost at the other end of the parking lot. By the time I reached it, jamming the key into the lock, my coat was soaked, and my hair was matted to my forehead. Dropping the pizzas into the passenger seat, I dropped into the driver's seat and yanked the door shut. Yanking off my jacket, I threw it into the back seat and smoothed my hair back, rubbing my arms and shivering slightly as a loud rumble of thunder came from outside.
Fucking February weather,
I muttered, leaning over to open my glove box as I slid the key into the ignition in the center console. After fumbling for a moment, I pulled out a battered map, flickering on the dome light as I unfolded it, shifting my gaze between it and the directions. I traced my finger over it as I read the first few lines, which led me to the town onto the back roads. But it wasn't long before it became useless. The thing was about 30 years out of date, showing nothing beside a dead end where the directions told me to turn.
Great,
I muttered, dropping it on top of the pizza boxes and staring at the car. No GPS to help either. This is what you get for driving a Saab 900 from the late 80s. You should have taken Rita's suggestion and bought a TomTom or something. I let out another sigh. No point in crying over spilled milk now. As I flicked on the headlights, wait, pause real quick.
Were you gonna
I
say there's no
I
crying over spilled cow milk? Were you about to say cow milk?
I was I was about to say that. I'm hate that you caught that. I was just thinking when you pulled out the map, I was like, who uses a map
That's what I was
anymore?
thinking. I thought you were gonna pause there too. I
I
was
was
like,
going
a
to.
fucking map? What are they gonna do? Land navigation?
Right. Um Jeez, I can't believe you caught the cow milk.
That's really funny. The
As I
character sounds like me though, where it said it was like great, fucking February weather. I've been saying that all year. That's so funny. But no, seriously, who uses a? I was like, damn, and who even has a map in their car? This must be like
that's
I
what
don't know what time of year like what year this is, but it must be like the fucking 2000 or something.
no, because he left his hometown in the late 2000s.
Oh yeah, so that's
So
around.
he's back after some time.
He's
So like
prepared. He's got maps in his car. That's crazy.
I guess
I
Jesus.
mean, I would look at the map on my phone, you know.
I get lost on my never mind.
We've been over this, so we know.
Huh?
Yeah, because you use Apple Maps. We get it.
Yeah. Facts. As I flicked on the headlights and wipers, the warmth from the heater began to blast into my face. I saw Tony locking the back door. He gave me a curt nod before running to his truck. The bitterness reared its ugly head again as I watched him drive away, knowing he was heading home to his own soft, warm bed, but I shook my head to cast it away, releasing the parking brake and shifting it into first gear. The car rolled forward, and I cast a look at the darkened shape of the pizza joint, flanked on either side by a video rental store and shops which had boarded up years ago.
It and the laundromat are the only things keeping this strip mall from going the way of the dodo.
I said to myself. Turning left, I headed down the main drag and the last of the dark buildings sliding past as I headed out of town. Wanting to break silence and filling the car, I fumbled on my iPod, which was connected to the cassette adapter in the car stereo. A moment later, the opening notes of the Bates, the lips of Jane Mansfield, spilled into the speakers. Okay, maybe
Okay,
this
wait.
was a
Hold on. What
while.
the fuck's happening right now? What
I,
time period is this?
I know.
First off, this
Video
guy is
store?
old school. He's still got an iPod, and well, I mean, his car's old, so like that makes sense. But
Okay. There's adapters for that.
not playing it from your phone is crazy.
Right.
This guy's
And
old school.
also there's a video store
Yeah,
like
this town must
like a
be.
Blockbuster.
This town must be like just at a halt when it comes. Like there are small towns that still have video stores.
Truly.
Like small towns, that's a real thing.
But
But the iPod thing is crazy. I've been in cars though, actually recently, where they use an iPod. I'm like, did you load that thing on your computer like every day? Like you just put the more recent songs on? Like just use your phone, dude.
yeah, I don't get it. It's like
And I
okay.
apologize if the author in real life is that's what they do with their actual car, but that is so old world.
Unless you do it ironically, I guess.
I mean, I've always like myself. I was like, man, it'd be kind of cool and nostalgic to like go to the gym and use my iPod and have like wired
You would
headphones, like the big. Like, I had the big iPod, like the one that was like thick with
yeah,
like a bunch of games on it.
I have the new like the first I have the first the first one that came out.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Like the one where like,
Yeah.
yeah,
You would have to wear wired headphones
it's like
though.
a brick.
Who does that?
I don't even make them anymore. They don't make iPods anymore. I don't think.
I don't think so. Yeah, I need to know what year we're in. I'm I'm picturing I don't know.
I'm picturing like 2000, like the 2000, like 2000 and like 12.
Yeah, I guess so. I've
What was the song of like the 2000s? Like what was like a popular song?
um I don't know. Let's see.
Like a rock song.
I graduated high school in 2011. So maybe around that time.
He's just blasting Creed in his car. Can you take me higher? to a place.
I thought you were going to continue.
No.
All right. Um, Tapping my fingers on the steering wheel to the
Hold
beat.
me now. I'm 6 feet on the edge, and I'm thinking maybe 6 feet ain't too far down. That's what he's listening to right now. He's listening to the Creed. All right, sorry.
Tapping, that was my round of applause. Tapping my fingers on the steering wheel to the beat, I glanced at the directions again. They said to take a couple of turns once I'd left town, and after making sure I had enough gas to make it there and back, I began what I hoped would be a relatively short journey. But whether it was due to my bad mood or the crappy weather, it seemed like an eternity. I kept glancing around as I made turn after turn, seeing only farmland and forest. As the minutes ticked by, my irritation grew, especially as a new thought entered my mind. I really hope to God that some dumbass teenagers didn't decide to prank the place by ordering pizzas out in the middle of fucking nowhere. I'd be pissed. It wouldn't be the first time, due to the lack of things to do, it had become a pastime of theirs. More than once, I found myself at an empty house with an order in my hands, even though he'd been the one to call for it. Tony had always directed his anger at me for it, occasionally even docking my pay for something that was out of my control.
Oh, wow.
I'd be pissed.
I really don't need that again, man.
I grumbled, reaching out and cranking the radio to Depeche Depeche mode began to play, trying to drown out the thoughts. The darkened shape of a farm flew by on my left, and I allowed my foot to ride a little heavier on the gas, the speedometer climbing to 40 as I rounded a bend. According to the directions, the turnoff should be just ahead. I braced myself to see nothing more than the yellow dead-end sign proclaiming my venture out into the boonies to have been for nothing. Instead, to my surprise and admittedly relief, I came to a three-way intersection, which had a street sign on the corner. I flicked on the turn signal and slowed, squinting to see the words displayed on it, Sycamore Street. Letting out a breath, I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. I turned right and headed down it, my optimism raising as the streetlights began to appear frequently, lining the side of the road like sentries. A few moments later, as the road dipped into a valley, I finally saw it. Tony had certainly been right about subdivisions being built out here. I was staring down at row upon rows of houses, which seemed in the dark to stretch away as far as the eye could see. I could also see larger buildings, one that had been to stores of some kind dotted around.
No wonder I've never heard about this place. It's an entirely self-sufficient community.
I whispered. I felt a sharp pang of bitterness, this time not directed at my boss, but surprisingly towards a community before me. I knew with the inevitable march of time that nothing could ever stay the same forever, but the idea that as my hometown slowly dried up and died, another was rising to so close, replacing the farms I'd known all my life, more or less wiping out what came before, stung more than I could care to admit. I shook my head slightly as the car headed down the hill. Just focus on finishing this up, and you can go home, Hell. But as the community rose up before me, another thought suddenly dawned on me.
Dawned.
Dawned. As the community rose up before me, another thought suddenly dawned on me. The directions the caller had given Tony had detailed how to get here up to this point, along with the street and the house number, but they hadn't said where to go once I'd gotten here. I let out an exasperated groan. The way this place looked like a damn maze from the top of the hill, it'll take half the night to find the house. The feeling of defeat began to creep back up on me until my eyes spied the first building I was approaching. It was a gas station, one which had been decorated to resemble those of the mid-20th century. I could see a display of oil sitting in front of the first set of pumps, the bottles and cans glinting in the overhead lights. Beneath a sigh of relief, I turned into it, parking under the awning and shutting the car off. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, closing my eyes and listening to the rain pelting the metal awning as another rumble of thunder
Reverberated.
reverberated through the
Reverberated.
valley. Then I pushed the door open and stepped out into the concrete.
Okay, let me give you a break here.
It's a
You need to take
lot
you
of
need to take a
reading.
second. Instantly, the smell of rain and gasoline invaded my nostrils, causing them to burn slightly. Slamming the door shut, I jogged across to the door of the accompanying convenience store. Reaching out, I pulled it open, stepping inside as I heard an entrance bell chime somewhere out of sight. The sound of the rain dulled as I stepped inside, replaced by the sound of a buzzing lights and tick of a clock. The counter to my right was empty, the register left unattended. Bags of snacks and rows of refrigerators fought for space with rows of auto parts and fluids. I couldn't help but let out a small snort as my eyes spied a row of Boone's Farm bottles set next to windshield washer fluid. A somewhat messed up thought sliding into my mind. Who normally grabs the wrong bottle by mistake? Turning and walking to the counter, I spied a bell. Reaching out, I gave it a small tap, and the shrill metallic sound echoing in the store.
I waited for a few seconds as the echo died away, replaced once again by the buzzing lights. Hum of the refrigerators and ticking clock. Nobody opened the door to the garage or came out from the restroom in the back corner. I drummed my fingers on the counter, then spared a look at the watch on my wrist, 11:15.
Come on, man, somebody.
I hissed, reaching out and smacking the bell again, this time a bit harder. The sound reverberated in my ears, and as it died away again, I felt my exasperation begin to bloom into annoyance. Finally, after what my watch told me had been 5 minutes, I turned around, heading for the entrance and resigning myself to search for the address.
Excuse me, can I help you?
The voice, which came from behind me, almost caused me to jump a foot in the air as I whirled around, unable to keep a surprised grunt from escaping my lips. A man now stood in the counter, smiling at me as I fought to get my racing heart under control. After a moment, he spoke again.
I'm very sorry I didn't come right away. I was in the restroom when you hit the bell, and well, call of nature can't be stopped once it's been heated.
He let out a chuckle on his own quip, then repeated his question, still smiling.
Is there anything I can help you with?
For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. The fact that the guy had somehow left the bathroom without me hearing the door open or the sound of his feet on the tiled floor had made almost given me a heart attack. Dude must walk like a spec ops soldier to pull that off. Finally, regaining my composure, I stepped back towards the counter, pulling the directions from the pocket of my jeans, clearing my throat.
Yeah, if you could please. See, the pizza place I work at, the next town over, got an order from here, and the directions I was given only got me as far as here. They gave me the street name and the house number, but with how many roads I saw from the top of the hill, that's about as useless as a friggin' screen door on a submarine.
Before I could continue, the man let out a loud bark of laughter, shaking his head as he slapped the counter with one palm.
That's a good one, Sonny,
he said. I raised an eyebrow. It honestly hadn't been that funny, but continued.
Yeah, so I was kind of hoping you might be able to help me point me in the right direction so I can deliver it and be on my way. It's my last delivery of the night, and I'd like to get home.
The man seemed to soak up my request, then nodded, holding out a hand for the directions. I handed it to him, glancing out the window as he read. The rain seemed to be letting up. Thank God. I turned back as he snapped his fingers.
Ah, yes, I know the address. Belongs to a wonderful family that's just moved in recently. The Corrigans.
He pulled a pen from his pocket and began to write on the paper.
Let me just write you down the directions. I'm sure they're beyond starving and looking forward to eat.
I nodded absent-mindedly, already planning in my head how to explain my delay to Rita if she woke up when I got home. Glancing at the lights of the first house, a question popped into my head.
Hey, by the way, when did this place get put up? I didn't hear anything about it back my way.
The man answered, still bent over.
Oh, not too long ago, really. The developers who set it up already did so with many other rural areas across the country. They're expanding now, and the residents which are moving in, myself included, love these kind of areas. Plenty of beautiful views, fresh air for the children to play in, and...
He paused for a moment before finishing.
Well, too quiet, honest, and this is just my opinion, but the local food around here is to die for.
For I simply nodded absent-mindedly again. Then, as if on a delayed reaction, the man's words suddenly clicked in my head. With them came a small wave of confusion, and I turned back to stare at the top of his head. What? Aside from the pizza place, a sizzler, and a subpar Italian restaurant which had somehow remained open despite anything, the nearest restaurant was at least 50 miles away, and there was no way anyone could describe any of these three places to die for. I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to be nice. I pushed it away as he stood up, holding the paper for me to take back.
I know what's happening. My theory. Here's my theory.
Yeah,
They're
I need to hear
cannibals.
this.
They're cannibals. They're cannibals. That's the theory.
You
He
think
said
so?
food to die for. I think they're cannibals. I think he's gonna encounter cannibals, and I think he's gonna like almost get eaten.
I hope not. That's disturbing.
I think it's cannibals.
However, you're probably right.
Here you go. Hopefully it'll be easy for you to follow.
Feeling relieved, I reached out and took the directions from him, glancing at them for a moment before sliding them back into my pocket and raising my eyes back to him, my mouth opening to thank him. That's when I noticed something which unsettled me somewhat. The man was still smiling at me. I hadn't really noticed it at first, but during our entire back and forth, it had not faltered for a second. Even now, the exact same expression adorned his face, the pearly white teeth almost seeming to reflect the overhead lights. Not only that, but his eyes seemed to almost contain the same twinkle they had when he'd first seen me, as if he were privy to some sort of hilarious joke he chose to keep close to himself. He chose to keep to himself. A small shiver raced up my spine, feeling more than a bit creeped out. I began moving towards the door, forcing my voice out calmer than I felt. See? The smiles. It's just a smile when there shouldn't be a smile.
That is so funny. 2 in a row. Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. This helps. Have a good night.
I turned and strode quickly for the exit. Behind me, I heard the man's cheerful voice ring out one final time.
You as well.
Then I was through the door, jogging back through the rain towards my sab. Opening the door and climbing inside, I quickly shut it behind me and impulsively locked it. For a few moments, I simply just sat there, trying to make sense of the interaction in my mind. Nothing about it had seemed remotely normal to me. I shivered slightly as I started the car, glancing back at the window as I slid from beneath the awning. I instantly regretted my decision. I could clearly see the man staring out the window at me. His face was blurred from the rain, but I bet my bottom dollar he was still smiling. Okay, seriously, what the fuck? I know not everyone here will be like him, but if we get any more deliveries out here, I'm avoiding that place like the plague. The one good thing he'd come out of the encounter was the directions. As creepy as he'd been accurate at least. Less than 10 minutes later, I was pulling into the front of the house. The rain had thankfully stopped, and as I stepped out the car, the pizzas held in one hand, I inhaled the smell of the wet grass from the lawns. In the distance, I could still hear the thunder rumbling as the storm moved away. For the first time since Tony had called to me, I felt relief, and I allowed a small smile across my face. After all this crap that's happened tonight, all I've got to do is deliver these, and I'm home free. Crossing the path which led to the house, I allowed myself to glance around and pause for a moment. In the driveway of the house sat about the last car I ever expected to see in a place like that. It was a green Dodge Coronet from the early 70s. The sedan's paint and bodywork looked pristine.
Huh?
I said, then looked around to the other side, expecting to see a Mercedes or Lexus in the driveway next door. To my further surprise, though, I instead saw what appeared to be an early 80s Land Cruiser. Like the Dodge, this too appeared to be in almost showroom condition. Okay, this is something I didn't expect. I would have thought folks in a place like this would own brand new luxury cars or SUVs, not stuff from 40 or 50 years ago. Go figure. Shaking my head for what felt like the millionth time tonight, I resumed my walk to the front door, climbing the porch steps and reaching out with my free hand for the doorbell. I gave it a press, hearing the chime ring outside. I stood there for a moment, listening to the distant rumble of thunder and whipping wind before reaching out and hitting the doorbell again. From somewhere within the house came a woman's voice.
Just a minute!
Satisfied I'd gotten a reply, I stepped away from the front door and waited. A moment later, I saw movement from behind the frosted glass to the side of the door. The same voice came from the other side.
Who is it?
I cleared my throat.
Pizza delivery, ma'am. I have your order.
In response, I'd heard the sound of the door being unlocked, and after another moment, it swung open. I found myself facing a woman only a few years older than me. Her mousy brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a pair of slacks and a button-up shirt. She smiled warmly at me as she spied the pizzas in my hand.
Of course.
She noticed my lack of coat and beckoned to me.
Please, come in out of this horrible weather. You don't need to be getting sick.
Smiling gratefully, I nodded, then wiping my feet on the map, I stepped inside as she closed the door behind me. I just would not go into somebody's house.
Like, no, ma'am, I'm trying to go home. Just
Right.
take your pizza.
The interior hall was warm and inviting, and I felt myself relax as the woman stepped back in front of me. She began to open her mouth to speak, but was interrupted as a man called from somewhere in the back of the house.
Honey, is that the delivery boy?
The woman turned away from me.
Yes, it is, darling.
She turned back to me, gesturing to the pizzas in my hand.
My husband will be right out to pay you. I can take these. Our boys are starving. I promised them something to eat before they went to bed.
According to Tony, I wasn't to let go of the deliveries until I'd been handed the money, but since I was already in the house, I didn't see the harm. I handed them to her, and she gave me another smile before turning and heading towards the hall. Left alone, I rubbed my still chilly arms and glanced around. The hallway was done in a very cozy retro style. Wood paneling covered the walls, and a patterned carpet lined the floor. Photos hung up from the walls, and I stepped forward slightly to examine the closest ones. The first showed the woman beaming and standing next to what seemed to be her husband, a tall, muscular man in his early 40s who smiled as well. Two small, tow-headed boys stood in front of them, also smiling at the camera. The picture caused me to crack another smile, seeing the happy family and feeling a pang of nostalgia for the days I posed for photos like that with my parents. I looked at the next one. The four were standing on what looked to be a beach of some sort, dressed in swim trunks. Turning my head slightly, I looked to the third photo. I just had begun to take in the fact that they were standing in front of a house when something clicked in my head. I leaned back, looking at the first picture again, then the second, and finally the third. For a moment, what I was seeing didn't connect in my mind. I looked again at the three photos and felt a huge chill pass through me. Wait, I need to know, what do you think it is?
All different people.
You think so?
I think in each photo it's like maybe like a person, a different person, or I don't know. Or like different, I don't know. I think it's a different person though in each photo.
All four of them wore the exact same smile in each photo. I don't mean they were similar, they were the exact same fucking smiles. All identical. Something that was impossible. Not one person can perfectly replicate the same smile or expression twice, whether it be due to the face muscles or outside elements, let alone four.
I can.
Can you?
Yeah, I can do the same smile each time.
Okay.
What the fuck?
I whispered, taking a step back and feeling as though I'd been drenched with ice water. My mind whirled, and I felt my heart begin to thump in my chest. Okay, calm down, Hall, I thought. Get a hold of yourself, you're just overthinking things. They don't have all the same smile in every single picture. You've had a long night. You're tired. Just get this over with and go home. I almost began to believe it, feeling myself begin to relax, until a sound came from behind me, in the den.
I didn't glance into it when I'd entered, even been too focused on the woman at the time. But as I slowly turned toward the source of the noise, my eyes slid over everything, my mind slowly falling behind. I saw the wallpaper, looking brand new but done in a pattern that looked long out of fashion. I saw the circular couch and chairs, all done in muted reds and greens. or in the case of one chair, plaid. I saw the green carpet, which I numbly realized was a shagged style, hadn't seen since my uncle had ripped it from his early 2000s. I saw the weirdly shaped lamps and tables. Then my eyes landed on the far side of the room. The two boys I'd seen in the pictures sat on the floor in front of the TV, both faced away from me. I could only see the backs of their heads as they played video games. And since every small kid, including my own cousins, play games nowadays, it wouldn't have been what fixed my attention. And it not been for two details. The first was that they weren't sitting in front of a flat screen TV. Instead, they sat in front of a huge CRT set, one which was clad in wood paneling, looking like something out of an old Montgomery Ward catalog. The second was that they weren't playing a PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox. I couldn't see the console from where I stood, but I didn't need to. I could see the screen, hear the sounds drifting out from the speakers. They were playing an Atari. In any other situation, it wouldn't have been something I'd have batted an eye at. In fact, I would have loved seeing kids playing retro games, as I'd grown up with them myself. But between the identical smiles and the photographs, my mind was fluently still trying to rationalize the brand new 70s decor, and this, it felt like the cherry on top of the proverbial creepy sundae. Just like the guy in the gas station, nothing about this place felt right. Every alarm bell was ringing in my head.
And that's when the two boys turned to look at me. Whether they had sensed my gaze or not, I didn't know. All I know is that I had to force down a scream at their expressions. Both of them stared at me with identical smiles. Smiles which mirrored those they'd worn in pictures I'd gazed at. Something clicked inside of me, and I suddenly realized why the gas station attendant had creeped me out. It hadn't just been the fact that he never stopped smiling, it was that the smile hadn't been genuine. Like they were more a painted-on facade designed to lull someone into a false sense of security. All this flashed throughout my mind as they continued to stare at me. Swallowing a bit, I feebly attempted to plaster a smile of my own on my face and gently raised a hand to wave them over. Neither of them moved, only continued to stare at me. All the hair on my body was standing on end. I took a step back. Okay, you know what? Screw this, man. I'll eat the cost that Tony will saddle me with. It's time to get the hell out of here. Feeling vulnerable, taking my eyes off the two boys, I turned to head for the front door, only to come face to face with two grinning
Visages.
Just like with the gas station, I hadn't heard the woman come back down the hall. She stood almost directly in front of me, her husband by her side. With another shiver, I realized he was almost a half foot taller than me, something that of 6'2". I wasn't used to. Reflexively, I took a step backwards, trying to put space between myself and them. For a moment, there was silence, and then the man spoke.
You'll have to forgive me, young man. I was busy putting away leftovers in the freezer. And my wife here always nags me about being rude.
They both let out laughs, like their smells, they were about as real as a clown's face paint. For a moment, I was unable to say anything until my mind began screaming at me. Play along, dumbass. If they don't realize you're onto them, you might be able to leave. I took another, almost imperceptible step back and forced myself to speak in a voice that was the antithesis of what I felt.
It's quite alright, sir. Believe me, my fiance nags me about the same thing.
Both of them chuckled again, and I felt another shiver at the sound.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one with that issue.
He reached into his pocket and withdrew his wallet.
Now, how much do I owe you?
He asked.
$24.76, sir.
I managed out. He pulled the money out, counting for a second before holding it out to me.
Here you are, son. Plus a tip for the trouble of coming so late.
Feeling as though I was inches away from escape, I forced a smile on my lips and reached out, grasping the money he offered, risking a glance up their faces as I did, and froze. I didn't mean to freeze in fear and decision. As soon as my eyes met theirs, it felt much the same way someone who's been hypnotized must feel. Everything drifted away, and I was vaguely aware of my arms lowering at my sides. My vision blurred, and the sounds began to feel as though I were hearing them down a long tunnel. Part of my mind attempted to scream at me, and I was unable to react to it. I simply stood there, feeling almost as if I'd stepped out of space and time. Very faintly, I heard the sound of a boy's voice calling out.
Mom, we're hungry. Is it time to eat yet?
After a moment, a woman's voice answered, sounding as distant as the boy's had.
Yes, dear. It's time.
For some reason, I'd never been able to understand why. That one sentence snapped me back to my senses. I came to, flying forward from the darkness tunnel I drifted into. Finding myself back in the hallway, as soon as I did, I had to clamp my jaw shut to keep from screaming my lungs out. All four of them stood in front of me, less than 2 feet away. All four still wore the same smiles as before, with one horrifying difference. One that I've seen in my nightmares ever since. Their heads were tilted down slightly, and their smiles no longer feeling fake and inviting. They now looked absolutely genuine and so very hungry. Oh my god, that is a I just pictured that. That is terrifying.
That is awesome. I was right.
Oh my god.
That is so awesome.
As soon as the realization hit me, I was a blur of motion, twisting around and dashing for the front door. Behind me, I felt more than heard the family recoil in surprise. They hadn't expected me to snap out of my trance. I knew they would regain their composure in seconds, but I was already tearing through the front door, dashing outside and slamming it closed behind me. I took a huge bounding step and launched myself off the porch, beginning to dash from my car. But I had taken less than 3 steps before I froze again. My blood froze like ice in my veins, and I couldn't help but let out a gasp. I was no longer alone on the street. Everyone was outside. Men, women, children, and teenagers.
Oh shit.
All of them stood in the yellow glow spilling out of their open doorways. Some were only a few feet outside, while others were closer to the street, but they all wore the same horrific expression on their faces. The same hungry smiles as the family inside. Oh my god. Can you imagine? A whole street of people just smiling?
Okay. This story is awesome. This is so cool. Um Finding my feet again, I raced for my sab. Behind me, I heard the sound of the front door opening, but I didn't dare spare a glance back. I knew if I did, I'd fall under the same spell I had before, and this time, I wouldn't come out of it. I didn't look at anyone, immediately kept my gaze fixated on my car. Mercifully, I hadn't locked it, and I yanked the driver's door open, launching myself into the seat and slamming it behind me. Fumbling with my keys, I jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I spared a glance as I yanked the shifter into the first gear. I caught a glimpse of everyone advancing on my car, their smiles still there, but now their eyes seemed to hold a mixture of anger and desperation. I floored it. The sound of the screeching tires filled my ears. I shot forward, the car launching down the street. I heard something slam into the back of my car and I felt the rear end fishtail slightly. Fighting for control, I shifted into third gear and I kept my foot hard down. The stab straightened out and I glanced down at the speedometer. Seeing I was already doing 45, I took the first left, trying as hard as I could to recall the layout I'd had to navigate to reach my destination. And I'm not getting lost in suburbia hell here. As I took another left, I chanced a look in the rearview mirror, and this time, I finally did scream.
More and more people were emptying out of their houses. The entire subdivision, by the look of things. This wasn't what had caused me to scream, though. It was the fact they were running after me, and they were keeping up. I shot another look down my speedometer. I was doing almost 50 miles an hour.
That's fucking impossible!
I screamed, But as I took another left, finally seeing the main road, I spied an 8-year-old girl, her hair done up in pigtails and her face, like the others, a hungry, animalistic grin, running after my car and almost matching its pace. On all fours.
Run her
I
over.
slammed. Yeah, truly. I slammed the car into fourth gear as the speedometer climbed towards 70, and finally the people began to fall away behind me. Still, I kept my foot hard down, the car's engine screaming in the cabin as the gas station approached on my right. I cast a look over it as I flew past. The gas station attendant stood on the side of the road. He didn't attempt to block my path, instead, simply watched me fly past him. I only had a moment to notice one detail. Unlike the others, he no longer held the grin on his face. Instead, like a child's Halloween mask, it was expressionless. And that's when one final detail I'd overlooked the entire time slammed into me like a train. None of them had ever blinked a single time. The
That.
horrific.
Go
That.
ahead.
I just. Sorry, go. What? What were you going to say?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder why he wasn't smiling.
I don't know. Maybe because he got away.
Do you think that they were all gonna like share him?
Probably, but like one person for a whole entire subdivision
Yeah.
sounds a little unrealistic. I would think. I don't know. That horrific night was almost 2 weeks ago now. I never let up on the gas until I made it back to town, glancing every 2 seconds into the rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't being followed. I raced straight to the sheriff's department, almost taking out a row of parking meters as I screeched to a halt in front of it. I must have looked like a lunatic with how I burst in there, ranting and raving. The sheriff and his deputies were understandably dubious as I recounted my experience, but once I managed to produce the directions I thankfully held onto, he sent a few of them out into their cruisers to investigate with it. They came back about an hour later with confused expressions. The words one of them said made my mouth drop open.
Sheriff, all we found is a dead-end road. There ain't nothing there.
The worst part about everything isn't that nobody believed me. As much as they try to pretend otherwise, I know they do to a certain degree for two reasons. Both evidence of what I'd said. The first was the money. I'd never let go of it after I grabbed it, keeping it balled up in my fists until I got in the car and snatched the keys. All of it looked brand new with one exception. The newest date on any of the bills was 1984. The second was the scratches on the back quarter panel of my sab, scratches that more resemble claw marks than human hands. The worst part was, they knew no one else would believe it. I guess that's why they quietly put up the cement barriers on the street of the road a week and a half later, to keep others from driving down there, to keep anyone else from falling prey to whoever or whatever those things were.
Pause. So the police didn't believe him, but put up a barrier?
I know, right? Like, wait, so do they? No.
So do they believe him?
I think, I don't know. Is it a parallel universe? Did he go into another dimension?
It feels like it, right?
Everything's from the 70s or 80s.
Very, very on theme for the last story we just read, by the way. I know they're still there. How? A day before the barricades went up, I ventured out onto that road again. Don't ask me why, not even I fully understand. I prayed I'd see what the deputies had, simply a dead-end road. Instead, I found myself staring at the same three-way intersection, the same sign. Sycamore Street.
I quit my job working at the pizza place the very next day. Tony gave me hell for it, for not bringing the money in. I simply told him to call the sheriff. I'm trying currently to find some kind of remote job. Rita, God bless her, has been helping me. I should have an interview coming up in a few days. If it weren't for the fact my mother lives here and refuses to leave the house my dad built for her, I would have simply packed our things up and left. But we don't seem to be in any danger here in town, so we've stayed, for now at least. And that brings me to why I'm posting this here. The first is, I guess, is to simply let it out of my head. I've had terrible nightmares almost every night since. Nightmares about what might have happened if I hadn't snapped out of the trance, about what they would have done to me. I frankly don't give a damn if you believe me or not. I simply hope this might be a form of catharsis, something that may stop me from waking up my fiance with my screams. But I have another reason, and regardless of whether you believe me, I beg you, please, if nothing else, at least heed this warning. Because I can't stop thinking about something that man in the gas station, or whatever he truly been, said to me.
The developers who set it up already did so with many other world areas across the country. They're expanding now.
That sentence and its implications scare me almost more than anything else. So please, if you ever find yourself out in the middle of nowhere and you stumble across a seemingly secluded community or suburb, one you never heard of being built, filled with things that make it seem like a place out of time, don't investigate it. Turn around and drive as fast away from it as you can, and don't look back, because things will dwell in them, waiting for or sometimes luring people into them, much the way an anglerfish uses the light on its head to lure prey close enough to devour. And unlike me, you may not make it out.
That story was awesome.
That was so good.
That story was awesome. I when as soon as he said to die for, I was like cannibals, 100%.
You
Has
called
to be.
it.
That was good. I don't know what else to say. That was good. We struggled a little bit with the reading throughout it,
Yeah.
but it
That
was
was
good.
that was
The
so good.
storytelling was very good. I liked it. It was like
Me too.
that's the second story too, right? That was like a parallel universe type of deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, what do you think it was though? Do you think it was a parallel universe or like what you said before, like the WandaVision show where it's just like shrouded in magic?
I think it fuck, I don't know. It's like I think it might be a like another dimension. Wait, you said parallel universes and other dimensions are different, right?
Yeah, but like they're almost the same.
Okay. It might be another dimension that he just like somehow made his way to.
Right. So like
And
dimensions is like in the same universe, just like almost like a mirror.
I think it's another dimension that he like made his way through.
Right.
Because it wasn't just the people, it was like everything. The money was different from the
Almost like it
newest
went
one
back in
was
time.
like exactly. But like a cannibal back in time.
Right.
Terrifying. Loved it. Such a
Good
good
story.
story.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um just kind of scary though, like just delivering pizza. When he stepped in the house, I was like, you dumb bastard.
I know. Why would you go into somebody's house?
No, I'm fine in the rain. It's fine. I'll stay here. But the fact that they put a barrier up at the dead end, suspicious.
Yeah.
Because even if they didn't believe him, why would they put the barrier up?
Right. They wouldn't do that.
Right. From like one person, but like this guy came in here is talking about some crazy shit, but they put the barrier up, so that makes me feel like someone knows something.
Right.
I would honestly like to hear more from this universe. Again, same as the Dr. Weller. If the author were to make a universe around this story and not even tell the same story or the same but creating a universe that this is in it,
Yeah.
right? Maybe a story about something completely different, but like this like being mentioned would be cool. Kind of like how Stephen King does his books. Like all the books he writes are all in the same universe. That would be something cool. Like maybe like hints, some of that, or just building something like around it. Very good story. I liked it a lot.
Me too. One of the comments is this was gripping, immersive, terrifying, and fantastic. And I would agree
Right. I
to
would
all of
too.
that.
Some people say, like, this person says, wow, what were these creatures? And someone was like, skinwalkers. I disagree with that. I think there's something different. Something completely different.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was great. That was awesome. I loved it. Thanks for choosing it.
Glad you made it out, OP. Let's hope the nuclear family doesn't decide on carry out next time. This author is good. I like him. I think we should read more stories from him, for sure.
Yeah.
J.L. Goodwin, 1990. Go check him out. This was a really good story. I was like invested. I'm not sure about you, but it was good. A lot of good characters. I think all the characters gave value to the story. Where some characters in some stories are like, they didn't need to be there. I think all the characters he had in the story were valuable. Like, gave like a really good immersion. So, yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this story. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on the video. And go check out our Discord and Reddit and suggest your own video or your own stories or stories that you read that you liked as well. And we'll see if we'll read those. Because we like to get suggestions. We've been vetting them ourselves, but if you guys give us stories, we'll read them. Other than that, hope you guys sleep well. And if you ever catch yourself delivering pizza or doing anything and roads that appear that haven't been there before, maybe don't go down them. Other than that, have a good night. I hope you guys enjoyed.